Soren opened his eyes. The world around him was a blur, shapes and colors blending into an indistinct haze. He blinked several times, trying to clear his vision, but the disorientation remained. He tasted dust, felt cold stone beneath his fingertips. Where was he? The air was thick with a strange metallic tang, and the ground felt unnaturally smooth and cold. He tried to recall how he had ended up here, but his memory was a foggy void. He sat up, his head pounding like a drum. Each throb sent waves of pain through his skull, making it difficult to think. He pressed his palms against his temples, hoping to alleviate the ache, but it persisted, relentless and unforgiving.
A vast, empty plaza surrounded him, the sky above a bruised purple. The color was unsettling, as if the heavens themselves were wounded. The plaza stretched out in all directions, devoid of any signs of life or movement. Buildings of impossible angles, crafted from an unknown dark metal, rose into the unnatural twilight. Their surfaces were smooth and reflective, distorting the already eerie landscape. He called out, his voice trembling with uncertainty.
"Hello? Can anyone hear me?" His voice echoed briefly before being swallowed by the oppressive silence. The lack of response only heightened his sense of isolation.
His voice seemed to vanish into the air, absorbed by the oppressive silence. He tried again, louder. Still, only silence answered. The emptiness of the place was suffocating, as if the very air conspired to mute any sound he made. Panic began to claw at his chest. His breaths came in shallow gasps, and his heart raced as if trying to escape his ribcage. The silence was not just an absence of sound, it was a presence, a weight that pressed down on him from all sides. There should be sound, the comforting hum of life, the familiar noises that marked the passage of time and the presence of others, but here there was nothing. The absence of sound was a void that threatened to consume him. The chirping of birds, the distant rumble of carts, the murmur of voices. But there was nothing, no signs of life, no indications that anyone else existed in this strange, desolate place. The silence was absolute, unbroken by even the faintest whisper of wind. Only an unnerving, absolute silence. It was as if the world had been drained of all sound, leaving behind a hollow shell. The silence was not just a lack of noise, it was a tangible force, pressing in on him from all sides. Soren stumbled to his feet, his hand trailing across the cold metal of a nearby wall. The surface was smooth and unyielding, offering no comfort or warmth. He leaned against it, trying to steady himself as his mind raced with questions and fears. It was then he noticed the most unsettling thing. There were no echoes. Each sound he made, no matter how small, was swallowed by the silence. It was as if the world itself refused to acknowledge his presence. Each footstep, each rustle of his clothes was swallowed by the silence. The lack of echoes made the world feel even more alien and hostile. It was as if the environment itself was designed to erase any trace of his existence. It was as if the world itself had gone deaf. The silence was not just an absence of sound, it was a presence, a force that seemed to actively suppress any noise. It was a silence that felt alive, malevolent, and all-encompassing. He was trapped in a soundless nightmare. He had to escape. The silence was driving him to the brink of madness, and he knew he couldn't stay here any longer. He had to find a way out, to break free from this oppressive, suffocating void. Days blurred into nights, the sky remained a constant, oppressive purple. Soren wandered the silent city, his hope dwindling with each passing hour. He scavenged for food, finding only withered fruit and stale water. The silence was a living thing. It pressed in on him, suffocating. He yearned for the crash of thunder, the rustle of leaves, the beating of his own heart, anything to break the oppressive stillness. He began to talk to himself, desperate to hear some sound, any sound.
He recited poetry, sang childhood songs, anything to fill the void, but his voice sounded foreign and thin in the crushing silence.
One day he stumbled upon a park. Dead trees stretched their skeletal branches towards the unchanging sky. He collapsed beneath one, his body racked with sobs. He was utterly alone. In that moment he vowed to escape. He would find the source of this terrible silence. He would find a way out. He wasn't alone. The realization dawned on him slowly, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. It was a feeling that started as a whisper in the back of his mind and grew louder with each passing moment. The realization struck him like a physical blow. It was as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs, leaving him gasping for breath. He had been so consumed by his own isolation that he hadn't noticed the subtle signs around him. He'd seen them before, flitting in the shadows. They were like fleeting ghosts, always on the periphery of his vision, never fully materializing. He had dismissed them as figments of his imagination, but now he knew better. People, their faces drawn and pale. They looked as if they'd been drained of life, their expressions vacant and hollow. It was a haunting sight, one that sent shivers down his spine. They moved with a strange grace, their eyes filled with a deep, unsettling sadness. It was as if they were dancing to a mournful tune that only they could hear. Their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, yet there was an underlying tension that spoke of unspoken pain. They were like him, trapped in a world that had forgotten how to communicate, how to connect. It was a prison of silence where words had lost their meaning and gestures were the only way to convey emotions. He reached out to them, his voice a croak in the oppressive silence. It was a feeble attempt, but it was all he had. The silence was suffocating, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't lift.
They didn't react, their faces blank. It was as if they couldn't see him, couldn't hear him. The disconnect was palpable, a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. He felt a pang of despair, wondering if he would ever be able to reach them. He tried again, waving his arms, a desperate plea for acknowledgement. His movements were frantic, almost wild, as he tried to break through the barrier of silence. He needed them to see him, to recognize that he was there, that he was real.
One of them, a young woman with eyes the color of storm clouds, stepped forward. There was something in her gaze, a spark of recognition, a glimmer of understanding. It was a small thing, but it was enough to give him hope. She moved with a dancer's grace, her hands flowing into a series of complex gestures. Each movement was deliberate, precise, as if she were weaving a tapestry of meaning with her fingers. It was a language he didn't understand, but he was determined to learn. He didn't understand, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, hope. It was a fragile thing, easily shattered, but it was there. It was a lifeline, a thread that he could cling to in the darkness. He watched intently as she repeated the movements, slower this time. She was teaching him, guiding him through the steps of this silent dance. It was a painstaking process, but he was a willing student, eager to learn. He mimicked her, clumsily at first, then with growing confidence. Each gesture was a step closer to understanding, a bridge over the chasm of silence. He stumbled, made mistakes, but he kept going, driven by the need to connect. A smile, the first he'd seen, touched her lips. It was a small thing, but it was a victory. It was proof that he was making progress, that he was breaking through the barriers that had kept them apart. They were learning to speak again, not with words, but with the language of the soul. It was a language that transcended the limitations of speech, a way of communicating that was pure and unfiltered. It was a connection that went beyond words, a bond that was forged in the silence. The city became less of a prison and more of a puzzle. Each street, each corner held secrets waiting to be uncovered. The labyrinthine pathways, once daunting, now seemed to beckon with the promise of discovery. Soren felt a shift within himself, a transformation from a prisoner to a seeker of truths. The city, with its silent whispers, began to reveal its stories to him. Soren learned their silent language, a graceful dance of hands and expressions. It was a language born out of necessity, a means to communicate in a world where voices had been stolen. The fluidity of their gestures, the subtle nuances of their expressions spoke volumes. It was a language that required patience and attentiveness, qualities that Soren found himself developing with each passing day. He discovered their names. The young woman was Lira. Her name, like a soft melody, resonated with him. It was through her that he began to understand the depth of their silent world. Each name he learned was a key to a new story, a new piece of the puzzle that was this enigmatic city. Their communication was slow, hesitant, but it was a lifeline in the suffocating silence. Every gesture, every glance was a bridge between their isolated worlds. It was through these tentative connections that Soren began to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. The silence that once felt oppressive now seemed to hum with the potential of unspoken words. He learned that the city had not always been this way. There was a time when it was alive with sound, a vibrant tapestry of voices, music, and laughter. The streets echoed with the sounds of life, a stark contrast to the eerie silence that now enveloped them. Soren could almost hear the echoes of the past, a distant memory of a time when the city was full of life and joy. There had been sound once, music, laughter, then the silence came. It was a cataclysmic event, one that stripped the city of its voice and left its inhabitants in a state of perpetual quiet. The silence was not just the absence of sound, but a presence in itself, a heavy, oppressive force that weighed down on everything and everyone. He saw the memory in their eyes, the echo of trauma. The silence had left its mark on them, a deep, indelible scar. Their eyes, windows to their souls, reflected the pain and loss they had endured. Yet within those same eyes, Soren also saw resilience, a quiet strength that had allowed them to survive in this altered world. Lira led him through the maze of silent streets to a building unlike the others. It stood out amidst the uniformity of the city, a beacon of mystery and intrigue. As they approached, Soren felt a sense of anticipation, a feeling that they were on the brink of uncovering something significant. It was built of stone, worn smooth with time, and covered in strange, intricate carvings. The carvings told stories of a bygone era, of a time when the city was alive with sound and color. Each symbol, each pattern seemed to pulse with a hidden energy, a reminder of the city's rich history. The air here felt different, heavier. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a palpable sense of history and significance. Soren could feel the weight of the past pressing down on him, a reminder of the city's lost glory. This was a place of memories, of whispers from a forgotten past. The walls seemed to hum with the echoes of those who had come before, their stories etched into the very fabric of the building. Soren felt a connection to these unseen voices, a sense of continuity that spanned generations. Inside, dust swirled in the faint light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. The air was thick with the scent of age and decay, a testament to the building's long history. The light, though dim, cast a warm glow on the surroundings, illuminating the dust particles that danced in the air like tiny specters. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with books, their pages yellowed with age. Each book was a treasure trove of knowledge, a window into the past. Soren felt a sense of awe as he looked at the vast collection, realizing that within these pages lay the answers to the city's mysteries. An abandoned library, a treasure trove of forgotten knowledge. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the past and present coexisted in a delicate balance. Soren felt a sense of reverence as he stepped further into the room, knowing that he was standing on the threshold of discovery.
She gestures towards the books, her expression a mixture of sadness and hope. It was as if she was entrusting him with a sacred duty, a mission to uncover the truth and restore the city's lost voice. Her eyes, filled with a quiet determination, conveyed a message that words could not.
This was where they would find the truth. The library, with its ancient tomes and forgotten knowledge, held the key to understanding the silence. Soren felt a sense of purpose, a drive to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long. This was where the silence had begun. The library was the heart of the city, the place where the first whispers of the silence had been heard. Soren knew that within these walls lay the answers he sought, the key to breaking the silence and restoring the city's lost voice.